called Prophet or Not It. You want to play a game again? Yes. All right. This one's called Fact or Scat. Some of you have played a version of that at home. Scat is the Bible word. Some of you know it. If you don't know it, ask your parents. Okay, so the way it goes, I'll read a sentence, and then if I'll say, is it a fact? And you can raise your hand. If you think it's scat, you raise your hand. So, Mary Magdalene was secretly married to Jesus. Fact or scat? Yeah. It's total nonsense. Dan Brown in the Da Vinci Code has just completely ruined facts around here. I mean, it's a fun idea for conspiracy theorists, but it belongs right there next to like Sasquatch and chemtrails and trickle-down economics. There's no evidence whatsoever, squat, zilch, nothing. Paul later in the Bible, he urges people, like, if you can, be single. Would you have done that if Jesus was married? No. Fact or scat? Mary Magdalene was the first person to see the resurrection. Fact? Scat. Some of you are like, I don't know. It's fact. In one account, Peter hears about it from her and then runs to check it out. Maybe he was excited, or maybe he didn't believe her. It's not quite sure there. It's possible he didn't believe her because in Jewish culture, no man would believe one woman. It just didn't happen. In fact, in the court, that's changed a ton, hasn't it? In the court system back then, you needed at least two women to say the same thing for it to count at all. And if one man said something different, who do you think won? Yeah, the man is right. It's remarkable that the most powerful story in the whole Bible, the resurrection, the point of the Christian faith, was put first in the hands of a woman. What a challenge to that culture, amen?
Amen.
Fact or scat? Jesus met Mary at a widow's grief support group. Fact or scat? Maya, you're the only one who got it right. Luke chapter 8, just a few little verses with tons of stuff in there, says that early in Jesus' ministry, he was traveling with 12 male disciples. You all know that part. And it says, and with some women who he had healed, including Joanna and Susanna and Mary, who they called Magdalene. And it says she had been cured of 7 demons. We don't know what that means. In Hebrew, the word 7 often meant perfect or infinite. So perhaps she kind of felt like her life was infinitely messed up. Some of us know what that's like. We don't know what the demons were, but grief, addiction, despair, abuse, loss, bad decisions compounding on each other. Have you been there? Like 7 demons of just everything falling apart. Luke 8, verse 3 also says that these women had means. They had money. They were rich. So either they were married to rich guys, and their rich guys let their wives wander around the desert with 13 weird guys, or the only other way that women could have money in that culture was if they inherited it when their husbands died. So early on, either Jesus met them and spent time together and supported them. That's the best theory here. So he met with these women, this whole group of women, and supported them after their husband's death. And after pain and the stigma they had to deal with, he broke all those boundaries of the culture. And Jesus shows up, maybe the only man who had ever listened to them. Certainly the only man who had listened to their sadness with honor. And somehow they felt healed and they followed him. That's the kind of thing Jesus did. And it's just my guess, but wouldn't it be another Jesus-y thing if he then took those women and dispatched them to go care for other widows? And then it helped them heal? Wouldn't it be a Jesus-y thing if he made sure that the male disciples who followed around knew how to cry and knew how to face pain and knew how to comfort each other? It's just a theory. I can't prove it. But whatever you thought you knew about Mary, add this part to your picture. Last one, fact or scat? Kids are in here. Mary Magdalene was a lady of the night. Fact? Scat? Yeah, again, total nonsense. This rumor showed up in about the 4th or the 5th century. It was a pope who's otherwise a really wise pope, Pope Gregory the Great, one of the greatest popes in history, did a lot of wise things, but he was trying to fill in some blanks, kind of like I just did with these, like we do a little bit here and we try to add a little, like a Sudoku puzzle where you just add a little bit. Pope was doing the same thing, but he was a lot worse at it than I just was. This is his idea. Okay, he said, the Bible said she had 7 demons. We read that, we can read that. Let's see, there are 7 deadly sins, which is not in the Bible, but the Pope knows that there's 7 deadly sins. And then he thinks, of all the 7 sins, what's the gross one? lust. And so if she had 7 demons, 7 sins, lust, that means she must have been promiscuous. Hence, she was a working girl. That's where it came from. That's where the idea came from. That nonsense has no basis. Mary Magdalene, we said earlier, probably a widow. And many widows, where he might have come at this is that many widows in that time, if you didn't inherit money from your husband, which most of them didn't, you had to find a job, and women couldn't get a job, so they had to do a job. And so if they had to survive, they would do that. But Mary had money, so she didn't have to get a job. So some people will tell you that Luke's nameless sinner, Luke talks about another woman who knelt at Jesus' feet and anointed his feet, and she was that kind of a woman. And some people say, well, she didn't have a name, but that's probably Mary Magdalene, which is nonsense because Luke always names Mary as the Magdalene. And then when John talks the same story, it's Mary of Bethany, totally different. So Alicia got that one completely wrong. She was the only one who got it wrong. Yeah. Someone might come up to me afterwards and say, Hansen, I heard there's a story in the Bible where Jesus and Mary kissed. That's actually a story from outside the Bible from a couple hundred years later. It's made up a couple hundred years later. And that was a greeting kiss. If you've been to the Middle East, like when men meet each other, they peck on the cheek. French guys do the same thing. If you notice in these kind of cultures, masculine cultures, men do that to men. Like a man wouldn't walk up to a woman in the Middle East and kiss her on the cheek. So even if this story wasn't made up 200 years after Jesus died, when Jesus and Mary kissed, it would have been equalizing the culture. It was Jesus saying, enough of this male dominance and breaking these boundaries. I think that's one of the things Jesus believed in the most, is taking people who are so pressed down and lifting them up. And I believe that's what the church is still called to do. Amen?
Amen.
All right, let's be the church. Let's sing our centering music and get on with some worship now that we know some things about Mary. Verses 5 and 6, number 272.